What for you is a limiting mindset? You've obviously observed this and to the point that you wanted to write a card about it. So tell me about what drove you to write this card.
Well, so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about some stories from my interactions with clients where you really are looking at where is it that they're coming from? What cards, no pun intended, are they playing with? What they feel like is actually being dealt to them. And you run into issues of inertia so much that people are making decisions based on this is how we've always done that. How much effort is this going to take to make this change? Rather than going, to the future and saying, hey, this is what we can dream to have and then work backwards from that. We do that with tree hack, right? A tree hack is a want. It's something that you
Yep.
want, not something that you know exactly today how to get to. And I think that, knowing today, that's the limiting mindset. The growth mindset is the imagining of the future state that you desire without limitations, and then working backwards and figuring out how to get there.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. And we're back. Milan, how are you?
I'm excellent, excellent. Hope you're having good. Well, you're in Australia, so it's not the end of summer for you the way it is for us on, September 2nd or something, as we are
Yeah.
recording this. I'm great, back home and ready to go.
Yep. Okay. Well, good, good. So we're recording another Cardcast episode. And today, what are we talking about?
Well, it looks like we got the limiting mindset card, which is one of the club's cards. So it's all about mindset and, in inner games. So we'll start talking about that one. Have you
Okay.
read
And
that one recently?
I have read it recently, and I've got some notes just to prompt the conversation as we go through. This concept here is something that we as Metronomics coaches, we're often the limiting mindset blind spot remover. We can point out those limiting mindsets, occasions, those experiences. But what for you is a limiting mindset? You've obviously observed this, and to the point that you wanted to write a card about it. So tell me about what drove you to write this card.
Well, first of all, as for many cards, the inspiration comes from anywhere. And in this case, if you remember, because you were there, we were talking about this a lot in Dublin. So it came up so many times. So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about some stories from my interactions with clients where you really are looking at where is it that they're coming from? What cards, no pun intended, are they playing with? What they feel like is actually being dealt to them. And you run into issues of inertia so much that people are making decisions based on this is how we've always done that. How much effort is this going to take to make this change? Rather than going, to the future and saying, hey, this is what we can dream to have, and then work backwards from that. We do that with tree hack, right? A tree hack is a want. It's something that you
Yep.
want, not something that you know exactly today how to get to. And I think that, knowing today, that's the limiting mindset. The growth mindset is the imagining of the future state that you desire without limitations, and then working backwards and figuring out how to get there.
So how would you identify a limiting mindset? You're in conversation with a client, a CEO, or a leadership team member. Give us some examples that you've experienced, because that just helps reinforce this concept for the people that are unfamiliar with it.
Oh, fantastic. So, for example, if they use past performance or past information as
Yeah.
justification for the future goal, and to be honest, if they feel any kind of need of justifying that want of the thing, there is already limiting, right? If I have to
Yeah.
say, why do I think I deserve that, or why do I think it's reasonable, that's already limiting by definition.
Yeah. And you often hear people say, well, it's a tough hiring market. Well, is it? What could you do differently that would make it not a tough hiring market? We
For
can't
you
do this
specifically.
because.
Yeah, well,
Mhm.
there is different
Yeah.
art on that, right? Is the
Mhm.
depleted labor market one? Maybe we'll get to it eventually. But no, you're absolutely, absolutely correct. Instead of saying, hey, what is it that I can do? The correct way or the growth mind way is what needs to be true in order for me to be able to reach what I desire.
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, think about what do I want, and then you can work about how are you actually going to get there.
Yeah, and again, the good thinking is, using Dr. Benjamin's Hardy approach of really looking at it from the point of view in the future, from be your yeah, or be your future self now, is really looking at it from the point of view of that future. You imagine or you put yourself in that place, like if that what you are going after already happened, and then you are thinking, what had to be true in order for me to get here? And then you can start looking at those things and say which ones are in my control, which ones aren't, which ones aren't, but I can make them, or affect them, and so on.
Yeah, and a lot of this is is framed really really well in 10x is easier than 2x, as well as be your future self now. Both books from Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And if I recall correctly, that timing was about when that 10x book came out, and we had that session with Ben Hardy in Vancouver, just over a year and a bit ago. So it was very current at the time, and it's I'm a models guy. If someone gives me a model and it allows me to sort of say, that's a match to this model, that gives me a tool, that gives me a way of explaining a concept to someone really really simply. So I love that concept in 10x. It's a great one.
Yeah, absolutely. So using the language from 10x, you then look at that future state and where you're trying to get and what needs to be true in order for you to get there. But then you do the flip side, which is what is it that I'm doing today that's actually not helping me to get there, right? And then the 10x starts happening because you can start really focusing on the things that are moving you forward and putting your energy and focus into them.
Yeah, so it's about sort of raising your ceiling and raising the floor and looking at what you're doing now that's not serving you to get to where you want to in the future. What about some other examples of limiting mindsets that you come across frequently?
Well, probably the most common is how much do you want to grow the
Hmm.
company? And I think we can do 15% a year type of thing, right? That's already there. Or really giving yourself a haircut before you even start a conversation, right? And saying, well, it's really hard because of ABC. It really comes with letting the past and the present, in a way, wait on how you're imagining the future can be.
Yeah, yep. I ran a quarterly session with a client a few weeks back, and I always get the CEO to set the context for the session. So what's going on around us that we need to be aware of so that we can focus on the right things today. And sometimes there is no context. Sometimes it's a 10-minute, 15-minute explanation of what's going on around the company at that point in time. And the context the CEO set that day was, if we could grow at 20% a year for the next 10 years, where do you think that would take us? And a few people got calculators out and they did the sort of 10% growth over that time. And that basically would have taken that company to $100 million revenue company in just 10 years. And the initial response to everyone was, well, no, we can't do that. We've never done 20%. Okay, just because you've never done it doesn't mean you can't. And one of the leadership team members said, well, if we were going to try and do that, we would have to start doing things completely differently. And he just got to that point by himself. He'd realized that, yes, if you keep on doing a little bit more about what you're doing, a little bit harder, then yeah, you might grow at 5, 10, 15% a year, but you're not going to achieve 20%, and you're not going to achieve 20% consistently. So all of a sudden the conversation turned around. Okay, do we now need to go out and aggressively start buying businesses? Because we're not going to do it organically. We can only do it through acquisition. And if we were to acquire two smallish businesses every year, gradually getting bigger as we get bigger, then we probably can, accretively grow at 20% through acquisition. And what started off as a that's impossible position turned into an incredibly exciting, we can do this.
Mhm. And it's a great example. I think that again, taking it one step further, right? Because they were asking the question correctly, which is if we were to do this, then this would need to be true. So, for
Yeah.
example, we have to
Mm-hmm.
start doing things differently. And eventually they got to the point of we have to become a business acquisition machine. So we have to really look at our acquisition and business integration process, because we have to be really good at that in order to do it using this particular strategy. And suddenly you go from a wish to a plan,
Yeah.
right? And to tactics of who do we need to hire, what skills are we missing, all of this good stuff. Yes, that's a perfect example of how you can flip something into the growth mindset and then plot a pretty realistic way to get to something you thought was impossible just a few minutes ago.
Absolutely. So their next challenge over this year and probably into next is to build that acquisition machine. If they can get really, really good at acquiring businesses and integrating businesses, then it suddenly becomes relatively simple.
I am just imagining the right top corner of their activity fit map.
Indeed. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Fabulous.
So limiting mindsets. If people wanted to find out more about what it is and the impact it has, and we've talked about 10x is easier than 2x, and also Be Your Future Self Now, both by Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan, where else could people go? Where else could they find out more about this?
Well, I think that there is probably quite a bit, and as I said, that my cars are not necessarily driven by research and finding a
Mm-hmm.
million of different resources. So the inspiration came from the conversation that we've had. So I guess maybe have a check-in with a Metronomics coach. That might be a pretty good place to start.
Yeah, because they'll ask the right question and they'll reveal the blind spots and remove them for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Okay, today is all about limiting beliefs. Great conversation.
Thank you very much, and see you next time.
See you next time, Mark.
Thanks for joining us today on Cardcast. If you found value in today's conversation, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's ahead. You'll find more resources and ways to connect with us at cardcast.ca or on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear how these ideas land in your world. Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.